Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer joins me to discuss the new Anglo American, which now has 7 assets remaining in South Africa, compared with the 650 assets prior to the listing on the London Stock Exchange in 1999. Hi Martin.
Oh, hi Sashnee.
Why has not a single pound been raised for Anglo American in London in its time of need?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, when Anglo decided to list in London in 1999, the story they put out was that, London was the biggest area of accumulated funds, and this could be a source of funds for growth, particularly in Africa. So that's the basis on which they sold it to the government, which was very naive. Instead of insisting that the listing remained primary in South Africa and in London, or you have a system like they have for BHP Bulletin in Australia, where Melbourne and London run the place, they allowed the headquarters to move to London, which was a devastating blow. And if you go down 44 Main Street now, you will see the impact of this, because this is a pale shadow of its former self. And South Africa has been absolutely robbed of what was an iconic company. And the whole basis of it was that, they would assist with funds, which we can see they haven't put £1 into it, since in 17 years. All they've done is just drain this company, and you've had bullying analysts and traders continually complaining, calling on them to withdraw from South Africa. This is the ugly face of the London listing. This is the ugly face of the way, these whole stories are put out by people who've only got self-interest.
How much damage has the London listing done to the South African economy?
It's damaged our South African economy. This was a company with 650 assets in the 80s. It did a lot of investing. It did a lot of growing of incipient businesses. It even invested in companies like Mondi Paper, which have a market capitalization greater than Anglo at this stage. So there could have been a clever unbundling. There could have been such a lot of thought given to this. It wasn't, because, these slick investment bankers come out with their Porsches, and they come and give you a story. And then it ends up that they make all the money, and the fund managers make all the money. The pension fund holders like ourselves who've invested in this company, what do we get out of it? The shareholders have been left here, so-called assistants from analysts and traders. I mean, they should be hanging their head in shame. They are really selfish. They've got no interest in anything but themselves, and they certainly did not have South Africa's interest at heart. They incessantly called for disinvestment. I mean, how arrogant. Here's a company that's been born, that's been created in South Africa. You would have arrogant fund managers and analysts calling for the disinvestment. Smart people. They're absolutely infuriating. There's just nothing about what they do that assists a local economy. They are interested in themselves and only themselves. Their own agendas come through, and you have a company that then is managed by this convoluted committee of different voices, and you get these highfalutin chairmen who sit there, pompously, but do nothing. And we've had, 3 CEOs of this company, all subjected to this bullying, to this harsh attitude. And we have lost out in South Africa through the way these companies presumably actually suck you dry, because we haven't raised £1 in London, but they've always complained about the dividends, and they've always wanted to drain the company of everything. They're always suggesting this, that, and the other, suggested that the company goes into iron ore. I can remember the vociferous shouts, go into iron ore. When they sort of respond to this idiotic suggestion, they overbuy in Brazil. They land into huge trouble because of the changes of the regulations, but they're over hasty in wanting to do things because of pressure that these voices continually put on management. And I think management for the future must just put earmuffs on and do their own business, because the interests of the company are not the same as the interests of these individuals who make the calls.
So listing in London did not do much good for Anglo American?
It's not what it's cracked up to be. The way it was sold, the way, this was the greatest accumulation of wealth, this is where we're going to raise funds, this is where we're going to build Africa. No, it destroyed the South African side of Anglo. And we can see we're down to, a total of 7 assets now. You're going into platinum, which I think is a very good one that they've held on to. Diamonds that they're sticking to, and copper. Well, copper, of course, is in South America. And the diamonds, we've only got 2 diamond mines here. So, it is really a pale shadow. It's actually tragic what has happened. At this time when you think that, okay, you're in London, now they will come out and assist. No, they don't. They kick you down the road. They don't want you to dilute the shares. The shares are already decimated. It's just a sad story.
So big listings aren't what they are cracked up to be?
I think that these big listings really need to be closely examined here, because I believe that had Anglo American remained with the primary listing in Johannesburg, this company would not be in the state that it's in at the moment, that there would have been a different approach. We would not have had this decimation of the shares here, because it was a company that was looked to be part of the South African fabric, and now it has been ripped out of that and stripped apart in London. And I must say that I turn to these chairmen as well that look so pompous, that run these companies, that run such rules, and look at what they do to you when you get to London. Certainly they have got their pound of flesh out of it, but what have the provident funds, what have the shareholders got? It needs some sort of inquiry how this could be devastated in such a bullying manner.
Anglo was arguably one of the most dominant mining companies when he moved to London from Johannesburg in 1999. What will Anglo contribute to South Africa once its current downsizing is complete?
Well, I think it will still do quite a lot in platinum, so that's good. Diamonds, well, as much as it can through Venetia. The Voorsput mine isn't a dripping roast. And then the copper will come out of Chile and South America, which is all right, it's looking good at the moment. But the future of copper is in Africa. The future of copper is in Central Africa, the DRC, where it's shallow, not where the grades are falling, where things are not looking too good in the future. It's a short-term type of palliative there. I think that, the real future of copper is in the DRC and Zambia. South America will not play the role that it has played in the past. So again, we look to Anglo, which probably is really heavily platinum based in South Africa. And platinum is, fantastic metal. So they're onto something very good there. But they're going to need to bide their time a little until it gets back into the right position. So its contribution, one hopes some of its legacies will remain, because of the way it deals with its personnel. I see Solidarity said that they hope the standards of the people who buy up these assets, because they're selling off the coal assets. There's a process involved there, and that might become better for us, because those shortlisted, some of them are well known to us. Their names will come up in the future, but one grouping could be very promising. It might be a situation where at last, these assets are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and we can keep a better watching brief on them. And then, the iron ore situation with Kumba being sold off, this has created some interest. You can see the way the shares have risen after the announcement. In fact, you had a situation where, Kumba shares rose far higher after the announcement of the new Anglo American than Anglo American shares rose. So you can see that there's a sudden strong interest in what is going to happen to Kumba. It does need to bring its cost down. It will need to, reinvent itself. But there seems to be investor interest in there. We know how strong that company was in the past, and perhaps, in 4 or 5 years, it will start an ascendancy again. We see that Anglo is giving itself that room with its Brazilian iron ore asset, where it wants to complete the whole project before it actually sells it. It has declared it non-core, so it is in line for sale, but it wants that project to be fully completed, because it could be a low-cost type of iron ore producer producing pellets into the market. And they said they'll review that in 3 years. So, we could have a situation where they keep it in 2 years, but it has been declared non-core, but they've left the door open slightly there.
And what are the developments underway regarding the sale of the South African coal mines?
Well, I think they're going to try and do that in a very sophisticated way, and they are taking everything into account. The empowerment aspects that have to be kept, the labor aspects, the fact that these coal mines are very important to our electricity generation. They're taking all that into account. So whoever buys these coal mines will have to take on all those responsibilities, and they'll have to tick all the boxes. And one hopes that, it won't be too long before those that are shortlisted are at least announced, and then we start looking at the unfolding of who's going to get those coal assets. There's also the question of South 32 being involved with the manganese assets that Anglo has, so that will also have to be dealt with. And then, coal in Colombia, where they are in partnership with Glencore and BHP Billiton, they'll be chatting to them, but they're getting out of coal. And where they should do well with the sale of the coal assets is in Australia, because they're selling metallurgical coal assets there which have won prizes, so they're highly regarded. And that could generate a lot of this 4 billion rand revenue that they're targeting to put their balance sheet back in shape and make sure that the company becomes attractive again to investor communities. But it's quite a sorry state that we've ended ourselves in, and there is a glimmer of hope, but it's like, one stage it's as tall as a house, and now it's like as small as a mouse. And will it squeak from now on? Possibly not even squeak. So hopefully on the platinum front it'll do well, and with the diamonds it should do well. That's where they're concentrating. That's a very interesting combination. The copper also has a sort of a consumer orientation, so it's become a company which has a consumer orientation. It'll be interesting to see how that goes, but it'll also be interesting to see who buys up all the assets that are being disposed of and what they do for them, what they do with them, because it's always embarrassing, when you dispose of an asset and then someone else does a fantastic job of it, and that's always the risk you run. And at the same time, selling them in this climate is not that easy, but I think they've been very careful in how they are approaching the sales. They are making sure everyone knows it's not a forced sale, but it is in a climate where you're not going to get the best prices. It's a tough climate, so it's not ideal for selling, but they're trying to make the best out of a non-ideal situation.
And why is Anglo confident that it can sell its assets for value?
Because of the way they've strategized, to make sure that if someone doesn't want to pay a reasonable price, they will hold on to the asset. They will put it on care and maintenance. They will take a different approach to it. If they don't get what they regard as fair value, they will then back off the sale, and they will keep the asset, but in a shut form, so that when things get better, they might be able to go along with it. And the indications are that those who are bidding for these assets are very well aware of that. They know that they're not going to get them for nothing, but they are going to get them at a good price. And I think this is the way they are strategizing the sale of these, and this is why probably these assets will be disposed of at fair value.
Thanks for speaking with us, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Sashnee.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.